it's always really exciting for me when I get an opportunity to spend some time talking to somebody who's really excited about what they do, and that certainly is Graham. So I'm here today with Graham Perkins from GainLine Sales Skills. Graham and I understandably met through networking.
That's right, yeah.
And it just felt appropriate for us to kind of unpick a few things. So we're here much in the same way as I've done with a few other people. We'll probably have several conversations this morning and share those over the next few weeks. But one of the first things Graham said to me this morning when I said, well, what are we going to talk about? He said, the whole process of buying is changing. And I guess we all recognise that when we take a moment and think about it. But actually, it was only when you started to delve into that I could really see how that works. Remind me, tell us a bit more about how that is.
Thank you, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to spend some time just talking about some things that I think we're both passionate about. I think in terms of the way that the whole sales process and the customer buying process is changing, is really been quite an interesting evolution over the last few years.
Right.
If you think about how we make decisions as individuals, we've now got a huge access to information. There's a lot of information out there. So if we were to buy a car, for example, we would do a lot of research on the internet. We would probably know the make, the model, the manufacturer, the specification probably that we wanted, the interior, and a lot of details about the fuel consumption and the information in the car. So when we're going to see the salesperson at the dealership, probably the only decision we're going to make is two things. One, the colour. We might want to see the colour in real life. And then to have a negotiation. And that's typically what we will then do. If you then turn that into a business-to-business context and buying and selling in the business world, then the business buyer, the purchasers, have now a huge more range of information. So they will typically come in to speak to a supplier, probably about 60% of the way through their buying journey.
As much as 60% of the way through?
Yeah,
wow.
It's various research that's been done, and if you look at the typical purchase journey of a business, they will be more than halfway, and typically it's 60% of the way through their purchase decision before they even speak to somebody. So let's break down a little bit what that buying process might be. So the first stage is typically becoming aware that there's a problem and that there's a need that they need to solve. So there's an issue that they need to solve. Going back to the car, we need a new car, we need a bigger car.
Absolutely.
So what they then do is they then say, okay, we've got a problem, let's go and research and look at the alternatives to this. What are the solutions that we could come up with? And in business world, that typically might involve some conversations internally, and then they'll go and start doing their research. So they'll come up with a number of alternatives. The next stage is then to say, okay, we need to make an assessment and we need to make some judgment calls on the merits of these different alternatives. And a lot of that process is actually looking at risk in business. So what's the risk of making this decision? And what's the risk of not making the decision? And that typically is where they'll start to engage with suppliers. And the final stage, or the next stages through, are then to say, okay, how do we go about making a decision, making a purchase decision, and then actually making the purchase, which will be signing a contract or going through to the purchase decision. So it's typically in the assessment of alternatives, managing the risk, or it may even be as late as the negotiation stage where they know exactly what they want, and they'll come in and just ask suppliers to come in and typically provide a price or a proposal at that point.
And isn't it interesting, because we're using video today, and I talk a lot about the importance of using video, and I've said in the past that people make their decisions even before they've walked through the front door, and part of that decision making process is they've had a look on YouTube, they've had a look on your website, they've had a look on your social media to work out whether you're the person they want to work with, and so it really is that important, because they will be going through that process early on before they've even picked up the phone, to give them an opportunity to meet you, to decide whether they like you, whether they trust you.
Absolutely.
And all of that sort of thing. So that's really fascinating in terms of the importance of making sure that their touch points, even before they've shaking your hand are there and available for them to enjoy.
That's right. That's right. And it's making sure that you're in the minds of the prospective buyers all the way through their buying journey. And in terms of the role of the salesperson or the person doing the selling in the business, it's really, really important that when you start to engage with a prospective customer, that you validate all of the thinking and the research that the customer's already done.
Right, okay.
Because there's a real danger from the customer's perspective that they've made an independent assessment and decision which may not actually fit their business needs.
Okay.
So a lot of the role now of salespeople is to firstly understand where the customer is in their buying journey.
Yep.
That's really important to understand that. But just to help them to maybe go back a stage or a number of stages, and just to reassess that what they've done and the thinking that they've already done makes sense. It makes sense in the context of the products and services that you've got, that are out there. And the really good salespeople are able to start to help the customer to adjust where they've gone wrong and to rethink and to reframe their existing thinking.
Cool. And how do you go about? I mean, I know you've got, interestingly enough, you've got some workshops coming up quite soon. But how do you go about helping people to hone their skills as far as that's concerned?
So I think there's a couple of things that's really important with this. I think the first thing is to change the nature of their mindset.
Right.
And I think mindset is really, really important from a sales perspective. Because I start off and I actually talk to people and I say, sales now is no longer about selling.
Right.
Sales now is about helping your customers to make a purchase decision.
Okay.
And if you change that mindset and if you change that framing, then the whole conversation changes.
Right.
Because it changes from you and your business and what you do to your customer and their business and what they do. And what customers are looking for is they're looking for people to validate and to provide information, to provide content, to provide insight. So you need to work out how you can do that for your customers. And one of the greatest skills salespeople have is questioning.
Right.
And the questions that you ask a prospective customer really define how you build that relationship and you build that trust. So one of the biggest skills that I talk to people about is the twofold skill of questioning and listening. Because if you don't have the two in conjunction, then neither of them work.
But both are useful, but the two together are massively powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm running 2 workshops. I'm running one this week on Wednesday evening with Better Prospects up in Amersham, and we're bringing businesses together and just allowing them to network, and then we're covering 2 topics around how businesses can grow. So thinking of some of these sales challenges from a sales perspective, and then Fred from Better Prospects will be talking to businesses about how they build teams and how they build a employee base. So that's the first one that I'm doing. The second one that I'm doing is a workshop with Ash Taylor, the great Ash Taylor, and we're doing 2 things. We're talking about how to make the most of opportunities and turn opportunities into customers, and then how to develop customers and grow customers once you've got them on board.
Right, but these workshops are happening this week, but these are the sort of workshops that you do kind of a lot of the time anyway. Very
typically, and we'll be doing more of these types of things going forward.
Right, well, it's been great catching up this morning, and I look forward to doing so again.
Thank you, Jay.
Cheers.